Hello there friends, welcome back to another episode of Generation Tech. My name is Alan. If you take a look at Tatooine, it's a completely desolate planet. Life here is so difficult that people literally farm moisture out of the air to drink. Talk about an extreme subsistence farming lifestyle. It makes rice and grain look like cash crops. There are a lot of things on Tatooine that are wrong aside from the terrible environmental conditions, like the two freaking suns, which gives all of the local inhabitants the base racial trait of skin cancer. You start off with -3 points in your constitution. There's also the lawlessness created by the Republic's absence. Heck, not even corporate entities touch this place. I mean, the last mega conglomerate that tried to make Tatooine into something was Surzica Arms. Well, actually, back then they were still called Surzica Mining and Industries. And like every other mining company that came to Tatooine before it realized that the plentiful ore reserves there were of terrible quality and not really viable for export, Surzica also found themselves being constantly harassed by marauding bands of Tusken raiders and, of course, those pesky little Jawas that were famous for stealing everything that wasn't nailed down to the core of the planet. Needless to say, everything on Tatooine, including the various species that evolved there, just kinda suck. You know, as far as which direction the lore in Star Wars goes, I'm pretty agnostic about most things. But if I were to sign or start a petition about how I wanted to see the Star Wars lore go, I know exactly what I would ask for. I would petition Lucasfilm to destroy Tatooine, maybe with the Death Star. I don't even care if they retcon a few things, maybe have Vader do it, as a way for him to finally overcome his fear of sand. That man definitely hated his childhood enough to blow it up. We just go to Tatooine way too much in the Star Wars universe. Now, I get it from a production point of view, right? Like going to an exotic planet, it's difficult. It might just be cheaper to continue going to the same desert planet over and over again, rather than, I don't know, the Maldives. But I really want to take a break from this whole sand thing for at least a decade or so. Also, I'm really tired of people apologizing for groups like the Sand People, and even more specifically the Jawas. I know it's really cool and hip to be open-minded to all cultures and cultural practices and trip balls with the locals in serene natural settings. I'm not against that in most cases, but you do have to draw the line somewhere. You have to be kinda realistic. Sometimes some cultures suck, and it's okay to say that. I mean, I've traveled a lot, and I've seen a lot of terrible things. This mentality that every culture is amazing and good should be embraced only really exists in the halls of the most elite and prestigious universities in the galaxy. If you actually take that mentality on the road into the actual galaxy, you'll end up like Reza Aslan, that time he went to India and interviewed a bunch of cannibals and then ate a human brain. Sometimes life doesn't award you for stupid behavior like that. You don't get patted on the back for being so open-minded. Instead, what ends up happening is you get chased around by a cannibal who then tries to throw his pee at you. Again, I'm not saying that we shouldn't be open-minded or embrace a general curiosity for the galaxy. It's not to say that we shouldn't be kind and optimistic and try to treat other people nicely. But again, there's a line that is not to be crossed. In general, it's just a good idea not to have very extreme beliefs or to romanticize other people's lifestyles just because they're different from your own experience. Especially if you are from a rich core planet and have had secure access to clean water and 3 square meals a day for your entire life, because there's nothing romantic about outer rim poverty and living on a backwater planet like Tatooine. There's nothing romantic about your entire economy depending on the Jawas, who hide their criminal activities behind the guise of it being a part of their cultural heritage or some other nonsense. It's one thing for rich kids on Coruscant, far away from Tatooine, to glamorize this idea of a bunch of sweaty rats running around in robes, putting people's vehicles on cinder blocks, and then selling them back to them. But ask the locals who actually live on Tatooine, and they'll tell you how big of a problem the Jawas are and what kind of roadblock they are to any kind of development and economic activity on this planet. So the Jawas are said to have originated on the planet of Tatooine, and most of their population is centered there. Although some groups have migrated to other planets, these individuals are known as off-world Jawas. No one really knows what exactly they look like beneath their robes, like we don't have any pictures yet. Although the Tatooine mechanic Palimoto, who's had many dealings with the Jawas, have mentioned that they're quite furry beneath their robes. Although considering her own criminal background and overall sketchiness, I don't know if we can trust her assessment there.
I don't know what to tell you, pal. I mean, there are a lot of parts missing. Tell the Jawas the Rodian left. Right, let's get this thing back together again.
Now in Legends, xenobiologists have theorized that both the Jawas and the Tusken Raiders on this planet come from one of the original inhabitants of Tatooine, known as the Kumkumga. This was a species with a relatively advanced society until the Rakan Infinite Empire ran across them and subjugated their entire population and turned them into a slave race. When the Kumkumga revolted against their masters, the Rakans essentially glassed their planet over with their fleet. I mean, Tatooine used to be pretty nice apparently. There were like oceans, jungles, and now it's all full of sand because of that one event. And, some Kumkumga apparently survived in caves and other shelters, unaffected regions of the planet, and they eventually devolved into the Tusken Raiders and the Jawas. Well, that's what the theory is. Other xenobiologists also have theorized that it's possible that the Jawas have evolved from rats after studying certain remains, which kind of falls in line with a lot of the legends and lore that locals tell about the Jawas, although that could just be because of blatant xenophobia and just hatred for the Jawas because of how they act. It should be noted that the Jawas have a pungent musk and animal odor, which also seems to suggest that they have poor hygiene. There is very little water on the planet, so you can't really blame them that much. Now, I think the Kumkumga theory actually makes a lot of sense because there are a lot of similarities between the Tuskens and the Jawas, including the clothing they wear. Both these species cover their entire bodies and faces with fabric that is designed to basically make them weather their very harsh environment. This, of course, could just be a natural evolution that happened due to just how hot and dry it is on Tatooine. It could also be because of costume and makeup budget restrictions for the first Star Wars film. For Jawas, the second their younglings can walk, they're given these robes that are designed to seal in moisture and insulate them from the heat. Basically, these suits are kind of like survival suits that make efficient use of any water that leaves your body, whether it's perspiration or anything else like that, like waste materials. Apparently, robes are hemmed to the armpits of the Jawas, and as the Jawas grow larger, it's lengthened. And actually, you can tell what a Jawa's age is by how many hems they have in their robes. Usually by adulthood, a Jawa has their robe modified between 5 to 6 times. Jawas were organized in small clans and tribes. Like the Sand People, they were generally nomadic and traveled from one area to another searching for scrap and food. Unlike the Tusken Raiders, the Jawas were not afraid of outsider technology and instead embraced it and tried to learn as much as possible whatever happened to land in their desert. And my theory is the Jawas are much smaller than their cousins, the Tusken Raiders, and due to that smaller physical size, they've had to rely on technology to basically survive. The Sand People would oftentimes raid Jawa colonies and settlements. I think the only way that the Jawas could survive against the Tuskens and other, dangerous fauna on this planet is by adopting advanced technology and weapons and stuff like that. After most of the major mining corporations abandoned the planet of Tatooine, an interesting phenomenon happened. The Jawas started inhabiting the giant sand crawlers these companies left behind, and using them as mobile bases. They returned these massive drilling vehicles into fortresses which could protect them from more aggressive species. This would fundamentally change how the Jawas operated. They would go from hiding and barely surviving Tatooine to completely thriving. Not only did these sand crawlers keep the Jawas safe, it also gave them a place to store trinkets and equipment. The Jawas soon realized the value of the various machines they had, which could be sold to inhabitants of planets for credits or even favors. It didn't really matter if the Jawas lacked in strength and size, they could always hire a more powerful species to do their dirty work. Now, the real problem with Jawas is they started doing much more than scrapping derelict and, broken down vessels and equipment. They actually started salvaging and scrapping other people's property, which is a big no-no. Thanks to Tatooine's general lawlessness and lack of enforcement, the Jawas basically were the biggest thieves on this planet and were stealing everything that wasn't bolted down. See some droids walking in the desert by themselves? Well, the Jawas don't care if they are sentient or free droids who operate independently. They don't care if they even have owners. They'll just stun them with an ion blaster, wipe off some serial numbers, and put a restraining bolt on them, and then quickly turn them around and sell it to the next moisture farmer they run into. What if they run into a starship that happens to be parked in the wild and unattended by its owners? Well, suddenly that starship is on cinder blocks with all of its valuable components removed and stripped away. At least if the Jawas had properly stolen this ship, it wouldn't have been destroyed.
The Jawas steal. They don't destroy.
Stolen or destroyed makes no difference to me.
See, I'm really tired of people apologizing for the Jawas' behaviors as if they can't help themselves, as if they can't learn how to be proper citizens in a galactic society. This isn't a bunch of wretched scrappers trying to steal inflatable bread from the corrupt and greedy Unkar plot. This isn't some street urchins robbing a large corporation to make themselves a better life. The Jawas are mostly not stealing from evil mega conglomerates and large businesses. They're stealing from hardworking individuals, barely getting by on Tatooine, and small businesses working in an almost impossible economic environment. A lot of times, like with the Rodian and Din Djarin's ship, they're literally stealing items and then selling them back to the people who they just stole it from. This is one of the most insulting crimes I can think of. And you can definitely say that the Jawas are a huge detriment to the well-being of the people who live on Tatooine. At a personal level, because of the existence of Sand People and Jawas, despite living in a completely remote area, it suddenly becomes extremely important to secure all important machinery and vehicles on your property in case of attack or theft. Moisture farmers generally place relatively simple but valuable air condensers throughout their property, which can sometimes span several square miles in distance. It's almost impossible to make sure that all of your evaporators are going to be secure. Remember, these guys are literally farming for water. This isn't some kind of cash crop or gold or something that they're farming for, so how much money they can actually devote to security is extremely limited, if not non-existent. Moisture farmers have been known to form alliances and co-ops and gather posses that chase away larger threats like Tusken Raider groups, but in general they just cannot afford security, even automated droid security. Although it should be mentioned, in the Outer Rim on planets like Tatooine, a lot of people are going to be terrified and hate droids in the first place, so that's not even an option. And if it is an option, oftentimes because of how spread out everything is, the only source of retail that you can find is these traveling sand crawlers full of Jawas. So you're buying equipment to protect yourself from the very people who are selling you that equipment. It's kind of ridiculous. And these Jawas are not known for selling pristine, new things, right? They're literally stealing scrap or picking up garbage and then refurbishing them by mostly just painting them and slapping on a few modifications here or there that might or might not work.
We really should weld these bumpers on, but that takes time, equipment, money. So, we use super glue instead.
Like, just look at that R5 unit the Jawas try to sell to the Lars clan.
Uncle Owen!
Yeah?
This R2 unit has a bad motivator, look!
Hey, what are you trying to push on us?
I actually heard that R2 convinced that R5 unit to blow its motivator so he wouldn't be separated from C-3PO, but that's not really the point. I mean, the Jawas just cannot be trusted. All of the things that the Jawas were trying to steal to the Lars were stolen. These were not pieces of scrap that they just found on the side of the road, and this theft cost hardworking moisture farmers and homesteaders not only property, but also potential labor that can provide them with additional income. And when you lose enough droids, not only are you not going to have that extra income that allows you to improve your life, you might not even be able to break even. You could lose everything. Tatooine is already a very difficult place to survive. There isn't insurance for these farms. And so this kind of theft makes the poor even poorer, and that hurts the entire area. Because if you don't have people with money, that also destroys the local businesses. And every homestead on Tatooine is pretty important and not easy to replace. Now, these businesses wouldn't necessarily make a brick and mortar store next to the Lars homestead, but businesses could establish themselves in Mos Eisley and Mos Espa and offer a delivery service to these farms. But here's the thing, these farms are going to be selling, newer product that's going to last a lot longer, but it's going to cost a lot more. And if your local inhabitants are being stolen from and then sold terrible things all the time, they might not have the money to afford these brand new products. So having a parasitic presence in your economy like the Jawas puts a huge strain on these individuals. And because these businesses don't have any customers, you're going to lose the rent that they could pay, you're going to lose all of the employees that they can employ, and you're also going to lose a lot of that foot traffic that this business might generate, which will help other businesses in the area. In general, for a stable and healthy society to be created, you'll want trade to happen between people in legitimate ways where both the seller and the buyer feel happy with the exchange. Jawas really throw a wrench into the system because they're not interested in fair exchanges of goods. Furthermore, these businesses have to deal with Tusken Raider attacks. Any type of technology that crosses Tusken territory generally is raided. And while the Tuskens don't steal technology, they just try to destroy it. Whatever isn't destroyed is usually stolen by the Jawas. The more things that are stolen, the tougher it will be for these businesses to make ends meet. They might increase prices, they might fire their employees, or they might just pack up and leave, which is terrible for the local economy in all situations. And when businesses close up shop, then the Lars family have to deal with sketchy Jawa traveling salesmen who not only sell shoddy secondhand droids and machines from sketchy sources that are very unreliable, they're also not dependable. Forget about getting your money back in case one of these droids aren't working, good luck finding them when you need them in an emergency, when a crucial piece of equipment on your farm actually fails and you need to replace it. And lastly, one of the main reasons why these mega conglomerates actually left Tatooine was not just because of the poor mineral quality. The sheer amount of losses they suffered from Tusken raids and Jawa threats was also a big factor. And as horrible as some of these mega conglomerates might seem, they were really the only entities that dared to invest in these areas of the galaxy. Simply put, the rest of the Republic and their Senate representatives didn't care about Tatooine. And since no one was going to invest in creating more hyperspace lanes on the planet or making a larger spaceport on the planet, and maybe, I don't know, terraforming Tatooine so people don't need to squeeze moisture out of the air, well, those are true lost opportunities that slipped out of the hands of the local population, the people who needed it the most. And it's all thanks to these xeno-parasites. And with enough investment and capital chased away from this planet, you basically create a backwater wasteland that no one wants to invest in, and that attracts another type of individual. We're talking about the worst type of scum, hunt gangsters who provide even less worth to the planet and only continue to exploit what little resources and manpower is left living there. So this might be a pretty controversial topic that you might not see on other Star Wars YouTube channels, but we're always going to go into these random places and talk about things that actually matter to the people living in the Outer Rim. As you can see, the Jawas are a huge strain on the local economy in Outer Rim planets like Tatooine. Well guys, I hope you enjoyed today's video. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification button down below so you don't miss out on the rest of our awesome content. As usual, my name is Alan, reminding you that my allegiance is to the Republic, to democracy. I'll see you next time.